All right, we're online. And so this evening, I'm going to do a behind the scenes reading of this article. It's entitled Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, a Mystical Vision of the 21st Century. Okay, and so I'm going to read this in preparation for tomorrow's regular Monday night reading group session, which we will have a panel for. And tomorrow night we'll work through this article paragraph by paragraph or even sentence by sentence. It's pretty deep, but it's an article by Diogo Biladas Ponte and Lothar Schaefer. And it's based on their 2013 book entitled Infinite Possibilities. Here's the abstract. We describe similarities in the ontology of quantum physics and of Carl Gustav Jung's psychology. In spite of the fact that physics and psychology are usually considered as unrelated, in the last century, both of these disciplines have led at the same time to revolutionary changes in the Western understanding of the cosmic order, discovering a non-empirical realm of the universe that doesn't consist of material things, but of forms. These forms are real, even though they are invisible, because they have the potential to appear in the empirical world and act in it. We present arguments that force us to believe that the empirical world is an emanation out of a cosmic realm of potentiality, whose forms can appear as physical structures in the external world and as archetypal concepts in our mind. Accordingly, the evolution of life now appears no longer as a process of the adaptation of species to their environment, but as the adaptation of minds to increasingly complex forms that exist in the cosmic potentiality. The cosmic connection means that the human mind is a mystical mind. Okay, I'm reading an article that we'll be using for discussion tomorrow evening. And it's an article entitled Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, a Mystical Vision of the 21st Century. You can find a copy of this article in the Dropbox for tomorrow night, which begins with the number 11/25/19, which is tomorrow's date. And so you can have a hard copy of the article. It's a PDF and it's a Creative Commons article. These gentlemen wrote this article as a tease for their full book called Infinite Possibilities. And it's actually, let's see, I'll get the full name of their book here. Okay, their book is named Infinite Potential, What Quantum Physics Reveals About How We Should Live. Random House, New York, New York, 2013. So that's the book that this is teasing. And James, the answer to the question is, please send I'll put my email address. Please send me a regular email to skip.conover@gmail.com, and I will add you to the regular Dropbox. Okay, so next section of this article, it's a long article. Introduction. When René Descartes declared that the world consisted of two kinds of material, i.e., thinking substance and extended substance, and when Isaac Newton declared that God in the beginning formed matter in solid, massy, hard, impenetrable, movable particles, so very hard as never to wear or break in pieces. Western science then became a form of materialism, and anything that wasn't matter didn't matter. When Darwin introduced Newton's materialism into biology, having or not having stuff became the essence of life, and greed and aggression became the natural virtues of our society, segregating one individual from the next, one country from another, and one species from the next. In this way, the classical world was a segregative world, and all aspects of life were affected. The physical sciences had nothing to do with ethics, philosophy. Philosophy had nothing to do with the arts, and philosophy had nothing to do with the arts. Order of the universe had nothing to do with the way in which we should live. As Jacques Monod described it, man must at last wake out of his millenary dream and discover his total solitude, his fundamental isolation. He must realize that, like a gypsy, he lives on the boundary of an alien world, a world that is deaf to his music and is indifferent to his hopes, as it is to his suffering or his crimes. In this totalitarian materialistic environment, Carl Gustav Jung had the courage to propose that our mind is guided by a system of forms, the archetypes, which are powerful even though they don't carry any mass or energy, and which are real even though they are invisible. The archetypes exist, as Jung described, in a psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature. Out of this system, the invisible forms can appear in our mind and guide our imagination, perception, and thinking. As it turns out, Carl Gustav Jung's revolutionary views of the human mind are in perfect agreement with the discoveries of quantum physics, which during the last century also came as a shock because they revealed the fundamental errors of classical physics and led to a radical change in the Western view of the world. The quantum phenomena now force us to think that the basis of the material world is non-material, and that there is a realm of the world that we can't see because it doesn't consist of material things, but of non-material forms. These forms are real, even though they are invisible, because they have the potential to appear in the empirical world and to act upon us. They form a realm of potentiality in the physical reality, and all empirical things are emanations out of this realm. There are indications that the forms in the cosmic potentiality are patterns of information, thought-like, and that they are hanging together like the thoughts in our mind. Accordingly, the world now appears to us as an undivided wholeness in which all things and people are interconnected, and consciousness is a cosmic property. Now, at this point, I want to recommend that you look up a set of videos by Donald Hoffman. I'll put his name here on the chat. He has done some interesting videos in which he posits that consciousness didn't come out of matter, matter came out of consciousness. And so anyway, I'm going to read on. In this essay, we will describe the similarities between Carl Gustav Jung's psychology and quantum ontology. Our description will show that Jung's teaching is more than psychology. It is a form of spirituality. By spirituality, we mean a view of the world that accepts the numinous at the foundations of the cosmic order. In the same way, quantum physics is more than physics. It is a new form of mysticism. which suggests the interconnectedness of all things and beings and the connection of our minds with the cosmic mind. Everybody having fun so far? Okay. Section 2, quantum physics and the spiritual foundation of the empirical world. If we want to characterize Carl Gustav Jung's psychology in one sentence, we can say that analytical psychology, embodied in the archetype structure, leads us to the view that there is a part of the world that we can't see, a realm of reality that doesn't consist of material things, but of non-material forms. These forms are real, even though they are invisible, because they have the potential to appear in our mind and to act in it. In the following sections, we will show that this view of the world is identical with the ontology of quantum physics. Our description is necessarily short, but the interested reader will find many details and references in our previous works. And then they refer back to their book, Infinite Potential, What Quantum Physics Reveals About How We Should Live. Okay, so I'm reading an essay, which we're going to discuss tomorrow evening in the weekly Jung reading group. So I'm not going to go into a long discussion tonight. And hi, Penelope and Carl, nice to see you. Okay, part 3, the basis of the material world is non-material. The first aspect of the quantum world that we have to consider concerns the fact that the basis of material things is not material. This view is in complete contrast to our experience of the world, but it follows from Schrödinger's quantum mechanics, which is currently the only theory that allows us to understand the properties of atoms and molecules. In this theory, the electrons in atoms and molecules aren't tiny material particles, little balls of matter, but standing waves or forms. And note, everyone, that you can get a copy of the hard copy of this article in the general Dropbox for the group under handouts, and then the subfolder begins with tomorrow's date, 11/25/19. All atoms consist of a positively charged nucleus, which contains most of the mass of an atom, and of electrons, which are somehow arranged in the space surrounding the nucleus. Electrons are tiny elementary particles. They have a definite mass, and whenever we see one, it appears as a tiny dot, for example, as a flash on a TV screen, or a little mark on a photographic film. In contrast to their appearance, the electrons in atoms and molecules aren't tiny material particles or little balls which run around atomic nuclei like planets around the sun, but they are standing waves which an electron enters, and when an electron enters an atom, it ceases to be a material particle and becomes a wave. We owe Max Born for the discovery that the nature of these waves is that of probability waves. That is, the electrons in atoms are probability fields. When this aspect of electrons first became known as was unclear. What are probabilities? Probabilities are dimensionless numbers, ratios of numbers. Probability waves are empty and carry no mass of energy, no mass or energy, just information on numerical relations. Nevertheless, the visible form of the world is determined by the interference of these waves. The interferences of atomic wave patterns, for example, determine what kind of molecules can form. In addition, the interferences of molecular waveforms determine how molecules interact. The molecules in your body, for example, interact in such a way that they keep you alive. In view of these properties of the elementary units of matter, we have to conclude that the order of the visible world is based on phenomena which transcend the materialism of classical physics. If one pursues the nature of matter to its roots, at the level of atoms and molecules, all of a sudden one finds oneself in a realm of mathematical forms and numbers where all matter is lost. Thus, one is led to the view that the basis of reality is non-material. In modern science, this finding was unexpected, and many scientists still don't accept it. But the idea isn't new. For example, in the 6th century BCE, Pythagoras was already teaching that all things are numbers and that the entire cosmos is harmony and number. In Plato's philosophy, atoms are mathematical forms. St. Augustine wrote in his Confessions, "The older I got, the more despicable became the emptiness of my thought, because I could think of no entity in any other way than as bodily visible." Moreover, Nicholas de Cusa, a 15th century German theologian, is credited with the statement, "Number was the first model of things in the mind of the Creator." At this point, the reader may already note the importance of the quantum world for Carl Gustav Jung's psychology. The discovery of a realm of non-material forms which exist in the physical reality as the basis of the visible world makes it possible to accept the view that the archetypes are true existing real forms which can appear in our mind out of the cosmic realm in which they are stored. Thus, we can confirm here on the basis of the quantum phenomena Jung's view that it is not only possible, but fairly probable even that the psyche and matter are two different aspects of one and the same thing. So I got up to the point that I suggested that we don't have a unified field theory which brings together quantum physics and classical physics. And it occurred to me that the unified field is the human psyche. Hi, Art. Hi, Sean. Right, Sean. Okay, so we're going to discuss this tomorrow night. So I'm just reading the essay to help everyone prepare for tomorrow night. And if you don't have a hard copy, you can write to me at skip.conover@gmail.com, and I will add you to our Dropbox, and then you can download it. Download this essay, which is 20 pages long. Okay, part 4, consciousness is a cosmic property. An important concept that arises in the quantum phenomena concerns the wholeness of the physical reality. By the concept of wholeness, we mean that seemingly separated things can be connected and can act instantaneously on each other over arbitrarily long distances. In the holistic universe, decisions made by an observer in one part of the world can have an instantaneous effect on the outcome of the processes somewhere else, an arbitrarily long distance away. For example, a thought that appears in my mind at this moment may instantly appear in your thinking somewhere else in another part of the world. In physics, we speak of non-locality, when two particles, which at one time interact and then move away from one another, can stay connected and act as though they were one thing, no matter how far apart they are. Now, this is what Einstein didn't believe, but he lived a while ago now, and he called it spooky action at a distance. But spooky action at a distance actually is quantum physics today, in part. In the world of ordinary things, no influence or signal can travel at a speed faster than the speed of light. Thus, any action taken at one part of the world can have an effect somewhere else only after the time that it takes for a signal to get from one point to the other. In the quantum world, the situation is different. Influences can act instantaneously over arbitrarily long distances, in principle, from one end of the universe to another. The aspect of the wholeness of reality can be described in a simple way in connection with the wave properties of elementary particles. In the previous section, we have seen how electrons in atoms are waves. Whenever we see an electron, it appears as a material particle. However, inside an atom, it is a wave. This metamorphosis of particles to waves and waves to particles is a general phenomenon that doesn't only describe the modes of existence of electrons, but is a characteristic of all elementary particles, atoms, and molecules. It means that whenever we see what we call an elementary particle, it appears as a tiny material thing at a specific position in space. In contrast, when such a thing is on its own, like when it is in a vacuum, it ceases to be a material particle and becomes a wave. You can think of this process as a spontaneous transition of what we see as a particle from a particle state to a wave state. The most famous example would be light itself. In infinite potential, this phenomenon has been described in the following way. At the foundation of the visible world, we find entities, which always appear to us as elementary things when we interact with them. However, when they are on their own, they become waves. As waves, they have lost all mass and they have become pure forms, patterns of information, something mind-like or thought-like. Accordingly, we can call the units of existence at the foundation of the world ETs, meaning elementary things of elementary thoughts, or simply entities. Being a localized material particle is one state of existence of an ET, being a non-material wave is another. As it turns out, the wave state is the preferred state of an ET. It is the home where it will go when it is left alone. As a wave, an ET has lost all of its mass. It has become a non-material and invisible form, and since waves are extended in space, it has no specific position in space, but many potential positions. We say that an ET in its wave state is a state of potentiality. Since material particles, whenever we see one, always appear with a specific mass at a specific point in space, we must conclude that ETs in a state of potentiality aren't a part of the empirical world. By making a transition into a wave state, an ET leaves the empirical world. I'll look forward to your story tomorrow, Sean. This phenomenon is general and cosmic. There is a realm of the universe that we can't see. It is a background of non-material forms, not things. The forms are real, even though they are invisible, because they have the potential to appear in the empirical world and act in it. In fact, we must now think that the entire visible world is an emanation out of a non-empirical cosmic background, which is the primary reality, while the emanated world is secondary. We can't really know what the nature of the ETs is in the non-empirical background of the world. Indications are that they have wave-like properties. If so, we must think that the background of the visible world is like an ocean. The ETs in this ocean are hanging together like the water waves in an ocean do, so that the nature of reality is that of an indivisible wholeness. And I just mentioned to you the famous quote by David Bohm, famous physicist David Bohm, who said, "Unbroken wholeness in constant flowing motion." The wholeness of the cosmic background is also suggested by the following consideration. If the ETs in the realm of potentiality wouldn't form a coherent whole, the empirical world that is emanating out of the cosmic potentiality would be chaotic. However, the visible isn't chaotic. Rather, it always appears to us as a coherent system. As patterns of information, the ETs in the realm of potentiality are more thought-like than thing-like. Thoughts usually appear in a conscious mind. Thus, the appearance of a thought-like form in the cosmic potentiality suggests that consciousness is a cosmic property. The universe is conscious, and our thinking is the thinking of the cosmic mind, which finds consciousness in us. The same conclusions follow from the holistic nature of reality. For example, in their book, The Conscious Universe, Menas Kafatos and Robert Nadeau have argued that if the universe is an indivisible wholeness, everything comes out of this wholeness and everything belongs to it, including our own consciousness. Thus, consciousness is a cosmic property. This quantum view of the holistic reality is in perfect agreement with one of Jung's most important seminal ideas, that is, the archetypal idea of unus mundus, which Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz derived from characteristic medieval views of the world. In Jung's words, quote, "Undoubtedly the idea of the unus mundus is founded on the assumption that the multiplicity of the empirical world rests on an underlying unity, and that not two or more fundamentally different worlds exist side by side or are mingled with one another. Rather, everything divided and different belongs to one and the same world, which is not the world of sense." And that's quote is found in Mysterium Conjunctionis, paragraph 767. Ontologically, this archetype means that there is a reality that must be united, apparently divided, opposed, but beyond the illusion of matter. It is one. The reader will note the agreement of Jung's views with the quantum view of the world that we have described above. The process of individuation is an innate capacity of the individual to become aware of the self. According to Robert K.C. Foreman, we have an innate capacity, which is an imperative, long life process of transformation. This is an impulse to unite what is divided. In The Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, Jung affirms that I use the term individuation to denote the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. Searching for wholeness would be meaningless in a Newtonian world of separate material things. In the quantum world, it is found a physical basis. Jung also understood the process of individuation as a religious impulse, which is a wholesome spiritual archetype that directs and coordinates the flow of human life. The word religious is used in this context, in this sense of its etymological roots, in which religare means to reconnect or to be bond or to reunite. As Aniela Jaffe wrote, quote, "Individuation must be understood in religious language as the realization of the godly in the human, as the fulfilling of a godly mission. The conscious experience of life becomes a religious experience. One could just as well say a mystical experience. That relates to the motto of the U.S. Army, be all you can be. Another characteristic aspect of Jung's work is his fascination with alchemy, and specifically with the philosopher's stone as a metaphor of the process of individuation. Jung considers this process as a transformational journey into the wholeness in which we bring the invisible to the visible, spiritualize matter, and materialize the spiritual. In Septem Sermones ad Mortuos, the 7 Sermons to the Dead, he republished in the recent Red Book, Jung, he uses the Gnostic term pleroma to refer to this wholeness. In agreement with the aspects of wholeness that appear in the quantum view of the universe, Jung believed that the psyche has a natural and innate urge toward wholeness. Henderson has pointed out that, quote, a sense of completeness is achieved through a union of the consciousness with the unconscious contents of the mind. Out of this union arises what Jung called the transcendent function of the psyche, by which a man can achieve his highest goal, the full realization of the potential of his individual self, unquote. The craving for the wholeness is the real opus that underlies all of Jung's work. In accordance with quantum physics, the meaning and purpose of our nature is anchored in the numinous realm of reality. As Jung describes the spiritual quest, quote, the main interest of my work is not concerned with the treatment of neurosis, but rather with the approach to the numinous. But the fact is that the approach to the numinous is the real therapy. And inasmuch as you attain to the numinous experience, you are released from the curse of pathology. Even the very diseases take on a numinous character, unquote. Sorry, this is getting long. So I'm going to save any comments on this, Sean, until tomorrow, because I can't read a long essay and also comment on it at the same time. I'm just trying to give you access to the information here. And then tomorrow we'll have a discussion about it at the 8 o'clock U.S. Eastern Time hour. As we have pointed out before, the path of ethos needs a non-empirical domain of reality. This invisible realm, which Jung assumed as psychoid, provides an infinite field for the progress of the ego-self-axis relation, nurturing consciousness as an element in which every phenomenon collapses. Quantum physics brings us a new kind of reality in which it is our task to unlock our potential and to free us from our ignorance, the biggest shadow of all. In agreement with Jung's analytical psychology, quantum physics provides us with direct suggestions of how we can live in accordance with the numinous realm of the universe. Joseph Campbell has used the metaphor of the hero to describe the process in which the ego unites with the self. In the first half of our life, our ego is separated from our unconscious. However, after this period, it has a longing to reach a primordial state of wholeness, facing all kinds of dangers and trials. The Portuguese language has a specific word for this longing, that is, saudade. We find this myth in countless ancient spiritual teachings, in the writings of the classical poets, and now it reappears in the worldview of quantum physics. Aniela Yaffe writes, quote, "In religious language, an image of a God who seeks man just as much as he is sought by man. God seeks the individual in order to realize himself in his soul and his life. Expressed psychologically, the self requires the ego personality in order to manifest itself. The ego personality requires the self as the origin of its life and its fate. In religious language, this means, quote, God needs man just as man needs God, unquote." As Jung wrote to Eric Neumann, God is a contradiction in terms. Therefore, he needs man in order to be made one. God is an ailment man has to cure. Okay, isn't this fun? Oh my, I didn't intend to read that long. Okay, I'm going to read about Eddington and then I'm going to call it quits. Ooh. I'm going to read about Eddington and then I'm going to call it quits for tonight. So I will have gotten through about half of this essay. In order for you to read this essay, if you're a member of our Dropbox, you can go to the handouts subfolder. And in the handouts subfolder, you'll find one subfolder that has the number 112519 at the beginning of it. And that subfolder has a copy of the full essay. And we will begin discussing it tomorrow. I'm starting to think that a full discussion is going to take many more than 1 week, but we'll see. All right, so I'll read one more section. This is section 5. Eddington's views of a conscious universe. In the 1930s, Sir Arthur Stanley Eddington, a prominent British astrophysicist, was one of the first physicists who systematically searched for aspects of consciousness in the universe, concluding that the universe is of the nature of a thought or sensation in a universal mind, unquote. Now, this is the same Eddington that did the observation in 1919, I think, that proved Einstein's theory of relativity. One of Eddington's arguments was based on the fact that when physicists make measurements, their observations make sense because the measuring instruments are connected with a meaningful background of the objects that are measured. For example, when we observe the movement of a light dot through the sky at night, our observations make sense because we know the planetary background when the planets revolve about the sun. In this situation, Eddington pointed out, observations of atoms are a problem because their background isn't known. Whenever we see an atom, we can see phenomena that occur at its surface, but we don't know what happens inside. Why is the background of atoms not known and even unknowable? Because, for example, as we have described above, the electrons in atoms are non-material, non-empirical forms, and we don't know what that means. Now we realize, Eddington wondered, what science has not. Now we realize, Eddington wondered, that science has nothing to say as to the intrinsic nature of the atom. If science has nothing to say about the building blocks of the visible world, it is a problem that must be addressed, you think. As it turns out, it isn't the only puzzle of its kind. A similar situation arises, for example, in neurology, where no measurements of the surface of a brain can tell us what is going on in the mind behind it. In spite of this similarity, watching a brain is fundamentally different from watching an atom. This is so because behind the surface of a brain, there is a mind and a person who can tell what is going on in his mind. In contrast, atoms aren't connected with elementary persons who live inside and can tell us what is going on behind the surface. Nevertheless, Eddington suggested thinking of the two situations together, that of the brain and that of the atom, and he concluded that the background of atoms is mind-like, since we need something to which we can attach the measurements of an atom. Quote, why not then attach it to something of spiritual nature, of which a prominent characteristic is the thought? It seems rather silly to prefer to attach it to something of a so-called concrete nature, inconsistent with thought, and then to wonder where the thought comes from. The last part of this statement is a surprise. We usually take our thinking for granted, and the thoughts in our mind tell us a lot of things, but they say nothing about where they are coming from. Is our mind an invention of our brain? Or do we have a mind because the background of the universe is mind-like and expresses itself in our mind? To Eddington, the unity of the universe made it necessary to conclude that behind all empirical appearances of the world, there is a background continuous with the background of the brain. Unity in this context means coherence, that the universe as a coherent system can be suggested on the basis of the universe unity of the mind. If the unity of a man's consciousness is not an illusion, there must be some corresponding unity in the relations of the mind stuff, which is behind the visible surface of things. Thus, from our inner sense of unity, we infer the unity of the world. If the universe wasn't a coherent system, but a random collection of disconnected piles of material debris, the unity of our thinking would be an illusion. On the other hand, if the universe is a coherent whole, the existence of our personal mind suggests that the background of the universe is mind-like. In this way, Eddington was led to the conclusion that, quote, the universe is of the nature of a thought or sensation in a universal mind. To put the conclusions crudely, the stuff of the world is mind stuff. As is often the way with crude statements, I shall have to explain that by mind, I do not here exactly mean mind, and by stuff, I do not at all mean stuff. Still, this is as near as we can get to the idea of a simple phrase. Unquote. Eddington realized that his views were alien to physics. It is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. However, this is a problem of physics, not of Eddington's theses, and it shows the inability of physical sciences to describe all the essential aspects of the universe. Even though they are controversial, Eddington's theses are in perfect agreement with Carl Gustav Jung's basic assumptions and with the quantum phenomena, which show us that there is a part of the world that we can't see, a background of potentiality that doesn't consist of things, but of forms. These forms are thought-like, not thing-like, and they are real because they can actualize in the empirical world and act in it. As a matter of fact, the entire empirical world now appears to us as emanation out of a realm of invisible forms. The agreement, if not identity, with Jung's basic theses is striking. Our conscious thinking is based on an emanation of forms out of a non-personal, that is, cosmic realm. Consciousness is not sharply defined, Eddington explained, but fades into subconsciousness. And beyond that, we must postulate something indefinite, but yet continuous with our mental nature. This I take to be the world stuff. We compare the mind stuff to our conscious feelings, Eddington concluded, because now that we are convinced of the formal and symbolic character of the entities of the physics, there is nothing else to liken it to. All right. I'll read one more page. That's all I can manage tonight. Quantum physics is the psychology of the universe. An important concept in quantum chemistry is the concept of virtual states. Virtual states are the empty states of atoms and molecules. For a more detailed description of the concept of virtuality in chemistry, with additional examples, see Infinite Potential. That's their book. All atoms and molecules exist in quantum states. We can think of a molecule like a mountain range with countless hills and valleys. Each valley is an energy hole, which contains an energy ladder. The steps of these ladders represent fixed or quantized amounts of energy. They are the quantum states of a molecule. Each molecule must occupy one of its states. It must stand on one of the steps of its ladders so that a large number of states are empty. Quantum chemists call the empty states of things virtual states. Virtual states are mathematical forms or patterns of information. They have the forms of waves, but these waves are invisible because they are empty. There is nothing there to see, but they are real and they truly exist even though we can't see them, because a molecule can jump into such a state and make it a visible state. You can think of virtual states as the logical structure of a system which contains its future empirical possibilities. All that a molecule can do is to jump from an occupied state into a virtual state. In empirical science, the appearance of entities which have no matter, no energy, and are invisible is an embarrassment. You can very well compare the situation to Jung's thesis that behind our conscious thinking, there is a realm of unconscious forms. If you have to describe the world by referring to an invisible, numinous realm of reality, you are leaving the realm of empirical science. Thus, many of the pioneers of quantum physics tried to explain the virtual states away as mere constructs that don't really exist. However, we have no choice. We have to think that the empty states of atoms and molecules are real because they can control empirical phenomena. For example, all chemical reactions are steered by the virtual states of the reacting molecules, which determine what kinds of molecules can form in a reaction. In a specific type of reactions called redox reactions, the products appear with characteristic magnetic properties, which are determined by their virtual states. In addition, oxygen can serve our metabolism because it contains what chemists call degenerate states. Degenerate states are invisible, and yet they are the basis for the particular reactivity of oxygen. This is no doubt there is no doubt that invisible virtual states are real. Since their inner forms can affect visible phenomena, they must be truly existing real entities. Molecules are guided in their actions by the waveforms of their virtual states, like by inner images. The concept of the inner images derives from psychology. Brain scientist Gerald Huther calls inner images all that which is hidden behind the visible surface of living beings and steers their actions. Similarly, Jung believed that the archetypal images exist in our consciousness, which are manifestations of the pure forms of archetypes, which are unknowable. In chemistry, a molecule doesn't do anything that isn't allowed by a waveform, an inner image of one of its virtual states. In life, a human being does nothing that isn't allowed by an inner image of the mind. There is an equivalent of the mental and the physical. Psychology is the physics of the mind. Quantum physics is the psychology of the universe. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I've read the first 6 sections of this article. It has several more sections to go, about another 12 pages, or I'm sorry, another 8 pages, I guess. But you can see if you go to the Dropbox for the reading group, you can find the entire article. And it is in a subfolder in the handouts subfolder called that begins with 11/25/19, which is tomorrow's date. And so I've been reading from this article, which is called Carl Gustav Jung, Quantum Physics and the Spiritual Mind, a Mystical Vision of the 21st Century. And I just also would like to add that lately my wife and I have been having a heated discussion, I would say, about what the possibilities of artificial intelligence are. And I'm much more conservative than she is. And my point is that neurologists and brain scientists at the most right now can put electrodes on your head and they can tell what part of your brain is active at the time you're dreaming. And I say, well, we'll have artificial intelligence when they can attach electrodes to your head and play out your dream on a screen so that we actually can see your dream. We're a very, very long way from that, if ever it will be possible. And so that would be artificial intelligence anyway. So thank you all. I have a good group of you listening at this time, and I appreciate that. I look forward to having a further discussion with all of you and with my normal webinar panelists tomorrow at our usual Monday meeting, which begins at 8 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, tomorrow, November 25th, 2019. Thank you for being with me tonight. I hope you will join me tomorrow. Take care now. Bye. Oh, by the way, by popular demand or unpopular demand, I have moved my political activity that does relate also to Dr. Jung's work. As many of you may know, I wrote a book in 2014 called Political Psychology, New Ideas for Activists. And that book contains about 50 of my essays. Pretty much all of those essays begin with a quote from Dr. Jung. But I've been criticized for putting the political aspects of what my knowledge brings me on this channel. And so I created a channel called Political Psychology. After this playback is available, I'll put a link to that channel. You can also find it by looking at a notice that I put up a couple of days ago that is on the homepage, so that you can find that political psychology channel. And so I'm beginning to put things on that channel, and I need to build it up to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of viewing in order for YouTube to pay any attention. So I would very much appreciate it if you would go over there and subscribe to that channel and hit the notification button. And also on all of the videos that are on this website and that one, please click either like or dislike at the beginning, because that too, even dislikes, get YouTube's attention. And so that will be helpful to me. So thank you for being here tonight. I'll be talking to you soon.